Welcome to the Nick Blevins Family Ministry Podcast. Our goal is to help you maximize your church's potential. You'll hear from top leaders in children's, student, and family ministry about the principles and practices they use. Now here's your host, Nick Blevins.
Hello and welcome to episode 95 of the Family Ministry Podcast. Whether you serve in children's ministry, youth ministry, or family ministry, every week we interview someone and talk about a topic in one of those ministries or maybe something that spans multiple ministries. And this week, I talk with Amy Fenton of Orange all about VBS. Now, you might want to listen even if you don't do VBS, because there are some things that we talk about that I think are helpful for any event or trip or a week of camp or something like that that you do in your ministry in terms of the planning and the execution and the things to think about, the priorities, the audience. We talk a lot about that because VBS specifically is something that's been done by churches for a long time. But I grew up in a church where in some ways I feel like we just did it because we did it and lost some of the purpose and the focus. And so we talk about that, how to make the most out of your VBS, how to plan for it, how to follow up afterwards. That's something that's maybe also not thought about as much. And the things that we talk about, I think, apply to other things like events and camps and stuff like that too. So you might want to listen even if you don't do VBS. If you do a VBS or some kind of camp or something like that in your ministry, I think you'll find this to be really helpful. Amy does talk a little bit about what Orange does to help churches that are doing some kind of a VBS program near the end, but most of our conversation is just kind of around how do you do it well? How do you prepare and follow up and plan during the week and communicate and all that stuff. And she gives some great insight there. So as usual, we can get all the notes and links and resources like that in the show notes at nickblevins.com/episode 95. And there's definitely some things linked there. Amy mentions a blog post. Orange gives away free resources related to VBS. And plus, if you're interested in looking at what they have, you can see all that at that link, nickblevins.com/episode 95. But let's go ahead now and jump into my conversation with Amy about how to make the most of your VBS. Today I'm talking with Amy Fenton, who is a return guest on the podcast. Welcome back, Amy.
Thank you. I'm excited to be back.
Yeah, it was episode 8, I think. So that was the early days of the podcast, even though it's not even 2 years old, so it's not that long ago. But for anybody who isn't familiar with you or didn't listen to that episode, though they should, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Surely they listened to that episode, Nick. Surely.
That's true. Everybody did.
I am an Orange specialist. I work for Orange based out of Atlanta. My job is to coach and consult with our churches that are multi-site, 3,000 or more. And I also am the director of Orange VBS.
Is just a quick clarification. The churches you work with, they are 3,000 or more or multi-site, or is it the both? They have to be 3,000 or bigger and multi-site. Okay, so you have a good number of churches then that fit in that category, I suppose.
Yes. Well, and that's new. That's pretty new to my job. We've restructured the Orange specialist a little bit. And so I'm really excited to work with those churches. Those are the churches that are the size of the churches I served in for 20 years. And so they felt like I bring that experience from that same size church to the job. So I'm excited to help them.
That's cool. And I know they love, all leaders love to network with similar churches and styles. Right. And obviously, sizes are different, number of sites, all that stuff, but that's fun. But of course, that's not what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the other part, the VBS part. So VBS for some folks it's not that far. It's right around the corner. Depending on how people plan, it might be like they're just now hitting the ground running, or maybe they started in October. I don't know. But I want to talk a little bit about what Orange does, but also even VBS approaches and philosophy or whatever. But I'd love to start with this. There are a ton of churches who've done VBS forever. There's some, I feel like all the time I know of a church. I just was with one last weekend that is starting it again after having not done it for a long time. I don't know if they ever did it before, but they're starting it kind of for the first time. Why should churches do VBS? Because I feel like that's something that people are evaluating all the time. Should we keep doing it? Should we not? Should we start? Why should they?
Yeah, that's a great question. at Orange, when we were really deciding, okay, are we jumping in the VBS game or not? I had a long talk with our leadership about that because they were very unsure. But for us, there's a couple of aspects we looked at. First of all, for your families that are already involved in your church, this is a great way to allow your small group leaders and the kids who are part of your church to have an extended time of fun. We know that fun over time helps build those relationships. And so, on Sunday mornings for the hour that you get them every Sunday, and knowing that most of those kids don't come every week, this is almost for kids what youth camp is for students. When you go away with students and you have more time together, you get to pour into them more. So this gives our small group leaders an opportunity to pour into kids' lives more, create some great memories, build some stories. So that's one aspect of it. And the other aspect is it can be a great outreach to your community that can be used as an on-ramp into your ministry. So we want to look at it for the insiders and the outsiders.
That kind of speaks to another question I want to ask, because I feel like churches, and I don't know if this is always intentional. Sometimes I feel like they haven't really thought through it. It just kind of happens that way. But it seems like most VBS approaches at a church are either more about discipleship or they're more about evangelism. And I'm sure a lot of people listening want to say yes to both, like they're both.
Right.
But at the end of the day, one is the priority. And it really does, I think it shapes the decisions you make. You know what I mean? If it's evangelism, if evangelism is number one, then we're measuring different things, or maybe saying things a little different, or approaching it different. If discipleship is number one, well, that's a different, success looks different there. Do you personally, I know Orange just wants to help church leaders no matter what their priorities are, but do you personally have a preference there? Have you seen something where it works better this way? What do you think?
Yeah. Well, we believe life change happens through relationship. And so I would say it's really not an either or, but a both and, although I hear what you're saying about we tend to lean towards one or the other. I think for our insider kids, we want them to connect more with those small group leaders so that relationship and trust is built, so that those small group leaders can disciple them long term. But we also know that for outsider kids, this might be the first opportunity for them to hear about Jesus. So that's why in Orange VBS, we, of course, always use that as a vehicle to share the gospel. One day is all about Jesus and the truth of the gospel, and what it means to have a relationship with him. I think that's going to look different presenting that to a kid that you've had a long-term relationship with, We don't ever want it to be a VBS experience where, I don't know if you ever had this when you were little, but when I was little, like the last day of VBS was like, hey, come down front if you want to be a Christian, and you'll get a prize and a hug from the pastor and get attention. And so then everybody would walk down the aisle. And when I first actually came to my last church, that was how they did it. And I followed up with each of those kids to meet with them one-on-one. And a lot of them really didn't know anything other than that looked fun, or my friend asked me to scoot out of her way in the aisle, so I just followed her down there. That's not what we want. We want truly, our gospel presentation is done in small group so that it's a person connecting with them and connecting with their parents to lead them into a relationship with Jesus. But, discipleship, evangelism, I could almost argue it both ways.
Yeah, and I get that. I think that most churches, it is both, and it really just comes down to priority. And it sounds like you don't have a preference. You could go either way. I feel like we did have that in church. My first experience ever teaching actually was in VBS, which was really funny. It's the first time I learned that I actually like teaching. And I think ours was talked about certainly as an evangelistic priority. Southern Baptist, we did totally invite people to make decisions for faith at the end of the week. Fortunately, it was not quite like that. There wasn't, prizes attached to it or whatever. So at least we got that right. But, and there was a huge, it was a big discipleship component. But for me, and we could talk about this more in a little bit, some of the things we did, I thought didn't really fit well with that priority of evangelism. It fit more with discipleship. So we were saying we want it to be one thing. But we were making decisions kind of like it's the other. I want to talk about that. But before I do that, I want to think about those people everybody that's preparing now, for VBS. And, obviously some folks have been preparing for months, but how can leaders prepare well for VBS? You've learned from working with churches that are implementing, Orange VBS curriculum and haven't done it yourself in the past. What are some key tips to prepare well for VBS each year?
Yes. Well, first of all, I would say if you're not planning yet, you need to get started right now. Today. Yeah. And you might be in trouble, especially if it's the 1st of June. No, you can do it, but start today. I would say you need to pick a great curriculum. We happen to have one at Orange that I would love for you to use, but make sure you pick a good curriculum. Unless you just have a massive church with a great team of writers that can produce that for you. Otherwise, I think take a great curriculum and make it fit your church. I think laying out a strategic plan over time. Orange VBS in our director's guide, we give you a plan, what you should be doing 4 months out, 3 months out, 2 months out. I think one of the most important things, and I actually talked with a church leader yesterday about this. He said, I'm looking at all of this and I don't know where to start. I'm so overwhelmed. And I said, you should not be looking this alone. VBS has to be done in teams. So when you sit down and look at all this curriculum and go, I have to do crafts and games and snacks and small group and large group, of course you're going to be overwhelmed. But to prepare well for VBS, you need to look at the core leadership in your kids' ministry and ask them each to take a small part or piece of that and let them own it. Yes, meet together to make sure they're doing what you want them to do, what your vision is for VBS, but let them own that and let them help you recruit the teams that will serve with them. So I think breaking it up into small pieces is really, really important. Let me say, first of all, the most important thing is prayer. I think that we forget that God cares about what we do more than we ever could. We're doing this for him and to tell kids about him. And I have to believe that that's pleasing to the Lord. And so pray that God will send you the right people. It always amazed me when we would start with prayer and people would come out of the woodwork, people I would have never even known to ask to serve in VBS. And it was great. That really helped us have a successful week. But finally, I would say this. Don't wait until the last minute, really, on anything, whether it's ordering T-shirts or preparing your lessons or making copies or looking at the games. I am always sad when I get into the office on a Monday morning and I've missed an email in the middle of the night, Sunday night, from a panicked leader. It's like, I was trying to print the, God time cards to send home in the morning. Our VBS starts in 5 hours and I can't find them. And, that's poor planning on your part. You need to plan ahead and print ahead and get everything ready now so that you know what those bumps are that you'll hit along the way.
Yeah, definitely. I know I don't want to make anybody feel bad, but, as they're listening to it right now, but, people that plan in like September, October for the next year. But generally speaking, to run, like maybe even with the guide that you give them, that's like, hey, do this 4 months out. Is it a 6 month plan? Is like, how far out does that even work? 6 months, 5 months, something like that?
Yeah, it's a 6 month plan. And 6 months out, we're telling you basically to pick a curriculum. and to find 3 or 4 core leaders to start planning with you. So if you're not 6 months out and hearing this, you're not too far behind. You can catch up for sure.
Yeah, you just speed up the rest of it, right? Get that curriculum, get that team, just meet a little more frequent, right, than you would earlier.
Right.
So, and we could talk forever about like what VBS looks like during the week or whatever, and there's so many different ways, right? Daytime, night VBS, the whole deal. I've seen week long or weekend, and there's just all kinds of versions. But one of the things I don't know that we talk about enough is following up after VBS, because whether it's an evangelistic focus and you've got new attenders that you want to bring into the church, or a discipleship focus and you're trying to help kids take steps, I feel like, or at least I've seen it a lot, and it happened in our church growing up, where there really wasn't much of a follow-up. It just kind of ended. So What are some tips there? How can we do that better?
Right. Well, I think the follow-up is the most important part. And you're right. We get to Friday and we think, oh my gosh, we survived. Thank goodness.
Yeah, just sleep till Sunday morning.
Right. And we're tired, and we've been playing with kids for a lot of hours every day and managing all these volunteers and making sure supplies are bought, and then remembering, oh yeah, and Sunday's coming. So I think to plan now what your follow-up will be is the best thing. Again, this goes back to not waiting till the last minute, because if you get to VBS week to think about it, you're not going to care. You're going to think, all I want to do is take a nap. My friend Tim Sherwood, who's at Prairie Lakes Church in Iowa, wrote a great blog post on this for us at Orange that I'm going to share with you, Nick, so that you can share it with your listeners. But he talks about how they strategically plan out their follow-up. And he says for every person that comes that is new, he said they do follow up with a phone call. And he said, I do know phone calls, like cold calls, are the worst. Nobody likes them. They might not answer the phone. He said, but all you have to do is say, thank you for coming. And would it be okay to send you an email with some upcoming opportunities for your family at our church? That's all it has to be. It doesn't have to be heavy pressure. You don't need to question them or make them commit to anything, but just say, hey, we've got some other fun things for your kids. Could I email you about it? And most likely they're going to say yes, assuming they answer the phone, right? And then follow up with an email just saying, hey, I just left you a message, but I wanted to just tell you a few things about our church. We had a great time with your child, and use that child's name and invite them back to something cool going on. And then send a postcard. I think one of the most important things is to actually keep an eye out to see if they do come. You know, we invite them and we send all these things, and then they actually show up and we don't notice. So keep an eye on your visitor cards and compare them to the people you've invited. And if they actually bother to come, then really, really follow up and make sure that you tell them you're so glad they actually did and you're glad to see them. Tim, another thing that Tim said is use social media to connect with the parents of these families. He said do a little stalking of them, because it'll allow you to have a better conversation about their kids. But you know, one thing that I said this last year in my Orange Conference breakout, and it's stuck with me, is I think that we know some people use VBS as childcare. We know they do. They just VBS.
Probably pastors, yeah.
Right. Yeah. They VBS hop in the summer. And I used to get really irritated by that until I realized a lot of these families that were VBS hopping, they were doing so because they desperately needed help with their kids. A lot of them were single moms who were trying to figure out childcare so they didn't have to leave them home during the day while they worked. So I think instead of being irritated by that, I should have been more aware of asking the why behind it. And I think that if we can see people in follow-up and meet a practical need of theirs. Because here's the truth. They think, I'm going to church hop to VBS all summer long, and nobody's going to notice or care. But what if we surprise them and help meet a practical need of theirs? And I don't know what that looks like. Maybe that's a single mom and you hear she has car trouble and you offer to pay to fix her car. Maybe it's a family that has somebody who's really, really sick in the hospital, and you follow up by sending flowers or going to visit or taking a meal. But I think that those over and beyond extra things that we can do as follow-up to surprise people that really don't expect us to care after that VBS week.
And you're right, yeah, it does make sense, but you're right that you'd have to plan that now because you're not going to pull that off on Friday the week of. Right.
It's so true. It's so true. And I would say this, because you're going to be tired, find some people who can help you with this. We used to use our senior citizens in our church to do some really great things for us during VBS. They couldn't get on the floor or go play games with the kids or roll around, but they did a lot for us to be involved. And I think this is one of those ways that you could involve them too.
How about even maybe during the week, or maybe this is part of the follow-up too, how can VBS connect beyond the week of VBS? Because even if you just, we talked about follow-up, but there's other ways that VBS could probably connect beyond just that week. So it's not like a one shot and okay, now it's over. Or like I've heard other leaders talk about, is VBS the best that anybody ever sees? So then whenever they get connected to next, it just feels totally different. How can we connect it beyond just the week itself?
Right. Well, my boss was not a huge fan of VBS when I first came to work at my company that I work for now, because of that very reason. He would say people do VBS and they spend a quarter of their entire budget for the year, and they have this big event, and then families come back the next week and the kids meet in a moldy room in the basement, and it looks nothing like VBS week that they came to. And that just bothered him. Like, he's like, kids, if they're important for that week, they should be important all year at your church. And I totally agree with that. So, with Orange VBS, we actually now do our summer series to match the VBS theme. It's all different Bible stories, but it still matches the VBS theme, so that if you are going to decorate big, you decorate big for the whole summer. But it also allows you to follow up to say, hey, VBS week ends on Friday, but this is going to keep going all summer long. We don't want to give your kids just a great week. We want to give them a great summer. So keep coming back. We're going to do the same theme, the same excitement, the same songs, and we would love for you to come and keep the momentum going.
I'm thinking about like the effort that goes into VBS anyway. You're saying if you decorate for the summer, the other plus here is that you could actually have your VBS decorations done weeks before you do VBS, right?
Right.
I mean, if you start summer here and you got to be decorated or whatever, and then VBS is 3 weeks later or something, at least that's another thing that you've moved farther away. So if you could do that in advance, if you could plan your follow-up in advance,
right.
You're already helping with the week of, which I think is a big deal.
Right. Totally.
This is totally off the cuff now, so I'm putting you a little bit on the spot. When you think, and you're talking with leaders who are doing VBS and stuff like that. What are some, and there's some that come to mind too that I've heard you talk about or others do, just helpful tips to run VBS well. Like I think about, I saw somebody just posted today actually, like their VBS is full already, sign up wise, and they have a wait list. And I thought, well, how smart is it? And it looked like they may have used Eventbrite or something. I know you talk about Sign Up Genius. How smart is that they, have a registration system that has max numbers built into it with a wait list to follow up? I mean, like those kinds of in the weeds practical tips. What are some things you've seen that have been good in running a VBS well?
Right. That is a great thought. Yeah, I think that people who do registration way ahead of time tend to be more successful because it also allows them to print name tags ahead of time, do small group assignments ahead of time, and be totally aware of around how many kids are coming. Now, you might be listening to this thinking, we've never done that. People wouldn't sign up ahead of time. Well, they might not the first year. But when I took over the kids ministry at my previous church, they didn't do registration ahead of time. And we had over 1,000 kids at VBS. So the morning of, if you can imagine what it looked like for 1,000 kids to register.
Yeah, this was probably great.
It was a nightmare. It was a nightmare. Like if I had been a parent coming to visit and pulled up to the line that was around the building, I would have just gone home. So we started doing registration early and giving kids their name tag and group assignment on the Sunday before we started. And that first year, probably 60% took advantage of that. And so there was no line, no waiting. Like your tag told you what aisle to go sit in and where to meet your leader. So you didn't have to do anything but walk in and hand your child to their small group leader and leave. So all the people who were in line that year said, how are they just walking in? And we said, you know what? Next year we're going to do this again and you can register ahead of time. By the second year, we had 90% sign up ahead of time. So I think that really can help you. I've heard some people say that they charge a little bit for their VBS, like $5, and are very generous with scholarships for anybody who can't do that. But they've told me, I never did this, but from what I hear from other churches is that there's a little bit of buy-in. And so when people have invested in something, they tend to be more likely to show up because you've saved that small group space for their child. And then if they're just going through websites, signing up for all the VBSs and then decide, oh, we don't feel like going to that one. Well, if they've paid a little bit, sometimes they feel a little more buy-in to actually go. I think the one other thing that I would do, even if you do pre-registration, is we were always very careful to leave room for guests who would walk in. Because that's the one thing I don't mind telling a church member who's not bothered to read or to,
has ignored you for months.
Ignored me, right. If I've been saying for 6 months, sign up early and they just haven't, then I don't mind saying you'll have to wait and let me see if somebody doesn't show up. But I never want to say to somebody who's never stepped foot in our doors, I'm sorry, we don't have room for your child. I just really felt passionate about leaving some margin for those kids.
I think some of it, like there's a VBS around here I know of that at a different church, and they charge, I don't know, maybe $25, something like that. And they sell out, every year way in advance. And I think it's because they have created, like, it's kind of like you're saying, once they've done it multiple years, they've created this expectation that, hey, this is how registration works. The deadline is here. It'll probably sell out before then. I just think, in the sports world, there's that phrase, deadline spur action. And we found that true in church world too. It's like, yes, people do wait till the last minute, but if they know the deadline, they'll act. And you'll always have people who, especially if you still have room, who will come up, oh, sorry, I missed it a few days ago. Can I still sign up? But I would rather have that, 3 weeks out at the latest rather than the week of. It's the kind of thing. So some of it just comes back to make sure you communicate about a deadline and really communicate about it, or, and we've even used price increases as and not with VBS specifically, but with other kids events and student things where, the price doubles after that.
Yeah.
And it's just a good incentive to get in there. And of course with scholarships and stuff like that. So I think it is helpful. I wonder about communication. Do you, generally speaking, I wonder if how well we're doing as churches with communicating about VBS with parents during the week, before the week. That feels like another thing that could be like done in advance. You know what I mean? So that you're not trying to craft that email at, 4 p.m. on Sunday, the week of, or whatever. I don't know. I don't know if you have any tips or thoughts there, but that's something else I think about.
Absolutely. I think that if you go ahead and prepare instructions on what to do the first day, I think that you cannot communicate enough what to expect when they arrive. Even if they've been in your church for a long time, they forget from summer to summer what it's going to look like on that first day. And that first day is always kind of chaotic anyway. So anything you can do to over communicate where to go, what pickup is going to look like, where to park, if you have to walk in or if you're doing drop off, how to register ahead of time, where to pick up their tags, just everything that you can do and communicate that. And I would communicate that through email, on social media. Maybe you send something home on Sunday. I mean, you're going to think, oh, I sent that email. They already know it. And half of them will see it on a take home and say, why didn't you ever tell us this? And yes, you will roll your eyes and say, I sent you 4 emails that said this, but people just, you almost need to bombard them with information. I would rather be overloaded with information than have heard nothing from you. So absolutely. That's something you need to think about now and start crafting. And I will say this, in our Orange VBS curriculum, we give you a daily email. Now it's not the prep ahead of time email because we don't know what your needs will be, but we do give you a daily email to send home, to email out each afternoon to tell parents what we talked about. And there's a space where you can customize it to do any announcements for the next day.
Oh, that's good. That's really good.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about, what Orange offers with VBS, what the curriculum looks like, how that works. I know you guys supplement it with things like that, just other helpful planning resources and all that. But before we do that, are there any other great ideas or things you've seen churches doing with VBS, through your work with Orange that you just thought, oh man, people should know that? That would be, that would be a helpful thing. Is there anything like that you'd want to share?
Sure. Yeah. Our friend John Huber, at Westside Family Church in Kansas,
yep.
They use their VBS. They call their VBS, Kid Gig, Growing in God Week. So Kid Gig is their huge VBS week at their church. And I don't know how many thousands of kids come, but it's really, really big. But they use it as not only a great VBS week, but also as a training for their missions teams. So their missions teams serve and they learn the material and the Bible stories and they do it that week, but then they take it on the road, so to speak, and they actually take it all over the world. So they did our VBS, I think last summer in 5 different countries, which is so great. I mean, because on most mission trips, you do see those mission teams working with kids. And it always amazes me when churches send out mission teams to go work with kids and they've never talked to the kids pastor. Like, you have a great resource to help you reach those kids that you're going to minister to. So that's a great way to use VBS. Is it can be used over and over again. I love the stories of it being used in South Africa or Guatemala or Ireland, because they did it here and then they figured out what parts would translate overseas. I have lots of churches that use it as camp material for their kids' camp. I have churches who use it as backyard kids clubs, so they adapt it to do it in neighborhoods all over their city. A lot of creative ways. I mean, there's no right or wrong to it, and that's what I tell people is that you really can't mess it up. Like if you're going to do 3 days, then do days 1, 3, and 5, and you can do it over a weekend. So yeah, there's lots of ways. And I would say this, if you want to know more about how people use Orange VBS, the Orange VBS Facebook page is a great resource. I love it when we get closer to summer because everybody on there starts sharing what they're doing and how they're doing it. And it's a great way to get good ideas. So if you're not on that page already, we'd love for you to join us.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. And just like all the other groups and pages you all have, people share stuff all the time. You can get in there and just search for something, registration or I don't know, whatever, communication, and probably find a question that's been asked, which is really, really helpful.
Right. Exactly.
There's one thing that I think about. I don't know. Well, and I think it really does apply to VBS. It's sort of a pet peeve of mine in church world. So we try to do a good job with it, so that we're not, but even we have missed it sometimes with different events or things we do. And it's really just trying to figure out who is here. Who are we reaching? Are we reaching 70% from our church and 30% not from our church? And then even beyond that one's usually easy to figure out, right? Because like the people in your church are, they're already in your church management system or whatever. Right. But I always want to know, okay, of the people that aren't from our church, what's their story? Are they part of regular attenders at another church? Are they, they haven't been to a church in a while? And so we've actually, with most of our events or camps or anything like VBS or even just one-off events, in the registration, we try to ask questions that would tell us, okay, this person's regularly part of another church or they're not. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. There's, we don't need to know, I don't know, denomination or how long it's been or, whatever, since you've been in church or whatever. And we try to find creative ways cause like you don't want to, we were talking about this recently. It was like, you don't want to, ask it in a way that really isolates them and makes them feel like, oh, you're really pointing out the fact that I don't go to church. So like the way we did it was kind of like, please check all that apply. And we mixed a few things in there, like how you heard about it. I attend, blank, I attend another, blank church or something like that. So you never actually had to check. I don't attend church,
Right.
you just weren't in our system and you didn't check that one thing. And you told us how you heard about it. So even creative ways like that, I think that's helpful because, one, if evangelism's your focus, you should really know, who you're reaching and what their background is. And then two, I think it helps with follow up too. Like I would follow up differently with that person who goes to another church than I would with somebody who doesn't go to church. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that's just a thought, something I'd toss out there.
That is a very good point. And I would say even in addition to that, if you're not connected in your community to other kids pastors, I would say make that a priority. Like I love to network, so that comes easy to me. But that was the cool thing is that I was able to even follow up with my friends at the other churches that I knew people typically church hop to say, hey, I think this family's gone to several VBSs. Have they come to you? They say they go to your church. Tell me their story. Is there anything we can do together to serve them? So yeah, that's really, really good.
Well, you know what? That makes me think of something else I've heard of. You've probably heard this too. I've heard of churches I think even our town here, donating their decor and supplies to the next church who's doing the same VBS 2 weeks later, in a different part of town. Like,
Absolutely.
That's really cool too.
And I was very blessed to be at a big church with a big budget, but I would do that. I have a Facebook page that's just Nashville area kids pastors. And so I would go on that page and just say, hey, we're going to be done with this material on Friday. And I would love to donate it to anybody who doesn't have a budget, who's going to do this, but you're doing it bare bones. Because we had several small churches and they actually could divide up because we were so big. Because we had leftover craft kits and leftover backdrops and, tons of things that they could use. And it was always really a joy to see that go into great use, Yeah,
and I feel like I heard of recently of churches that even planned it on the front end. You know what I mean? Like, because that's the next step, which would be great, as opposed to, hey, is anybody else going to be doing this? We can give you our stuff. Like, hey, we're planning now in whatever, I don't know, January, November, whatever. And we're going to pick the same thing intentionally, especially churches that might be in the same network. Like I think of all the churches that are in my area that are part of the same church planting network. Like how easy would it be for them to just say, hey, we're going to do all the same thing, put some of our kind of decor environment money in the same pot and then share it. Like that would be awesome.
Yeah, totally. I agree with you.
And I'm sure it happens. I've heard, some accounts of it, but I think that could be a big thing. So what else can you tell us about, Orange and VBS, what you all offer? Obviously, you offer VBS curriculum that ties in with regular curriculum, but what else comes with that and how can people get connected to it?
Right. Well, we have a website where you can go look at samples of everything at orangevbs.com. In the kit, it comes with everything you need to have a successful VBS. So there is preschool curriculum, there's grade school curriculum, there's preteen material. We provide large group and small group and videos and scripts and the music and dance move videos and social media plan and emails, and I could go on and on and on, but it's all listed at orangevbs.com. And it's a comprehensive, everything comes in a box. Everything is on a thumb drive. So you get it, you plug it in, and you pick and choose which parts and pieces you want to use for your VBS. We do sell a lot of extra items. Again, they're on orangevbs.com. You just click shop. So we have t-shirts and bracelets. And this year, the big thing is thunder sticks. I'm sure the kids are going to love them and the leaders are probably going to hate them.
Yeah, that's right.
What makes them really super fun. If you don't know what thunder sticks are, Google it. But we have tons of items available if you want to purchase extra things. This is my tip to you. Again, this goes back to planning ahead. I would order now, because if your VBS is in July, at the end of July, and we're sold out, we're not going to reorder those items because we're trying to clear out the warehouse because we're getting ready for the next year's VBS and to move stuff in for that one. So plan ahead and look at that stuff and order ahead of time. But yeah, the kit is great. It is great. It comes with everything you would need.
That's awesome. Well, I know you've done a lot of hard work with this over the past number of years, so thank you. It's been great. And I love how it ties in with the curriculum. I just think that's so helpful with helping families take next steps or maximizing your resources and all of that. I just think it's a great thing. And I've seen people use it, like you said, for camps or a weekend thing. I just think that helps. The fact that it ties in means you can be flexible and use it in some different ways. So I appreciate that and appreciate you coming back on the podcast to talk about it.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been fun.
All right. Thanks, Amy.
Have a good day.
As I said, I think there were tips and stuff that we talked about in there that would be helpful, whether you're talking about VBS or some other event or a trip or a week of camp or something like that you're planning. Here's some action items I thought about. Obviously, check out the show notes at nickblevins.com/episode 95. One of the things we'll link to is orangevbs.com. Like she mentioned, they give away free resources for leaders who are planning for a VBS. Some of them will be specific to their curriculum, but some of them are not. They would be helpful no matter which curriculum you're using. Another action item is to decide the priority of your VBS or your event. We talked about discipleship versus evangelism. It's not either or, but at the end of the day, one of them gets the priority. One of them is more important than the other, even if it's 51%, 49%. You know what I mean? I don't see churches that in reality do a good job splitting the purpose. And usually in the case of something like this, there's probably 4 or 5 things that you're trying to accomplish. So I think it'd be helpful to have a discussion about how will we prioritize that list of things and what's number one, and then make decisions based on that. Another action item would be to write a plan for your VBS that's on a timeline. What is your 6 months out to-do list? What are you doing 5 months out and 4 months out and all that stuff? And you can get that resource from Orange and kind of adapt that, or maybe you'll write your own. But either way, I would highly encourage you, if you don't do this already, to write out some kind of plan like that. And then as you work on it this year, save things in a system that would allow you to repeat it next year. And I've got a podcast guest coming up here soon that will talk about how their church plans events and a resource, a tool, an app that they use to save all of that kind of information so that when they do it again next year, they just pull that out, make a new project and off they're running with the same plan and template that they had last time, which is really helpful. So keep an eye out for that one. That'll be with Jim Murphy. That podcast will post soon. But I think that's the kind of approach you can take with VBS as well. Plan it, 1 year in a way that will help you in future years. So I hope that was helpful, whether you're doing VBS or not. You can get all the links and notes and all that at nickblevins.com/episode 95. So there you go. If you're doing VBS this summer, I hope it's amazing. I hope it was helpful. Reach out, email me if you have any questions. Reach out to Amy. She would love to help you for sure. But I hope that was helpful. And until the next time, hope you have a great week.
Thanks for listening to the Nick Blevins Family Ministry Podcast. We hope this helps you maximize your church's potential. We would love to hear stories of how you apply what you've learned. You can do that by leaving a comment on iTunes or in the show notes at nickblevins.com.